know that it is. I'm a little bit more in favor of a larger Hall of Fame than maybe I used to be maybe. Mark Morris says he watches DawgNation Daily every afternoon with a cigar. He says, I only sign in live for the 1st and 15. Mark, that's actually really cool. When I grow up, I hope to be Mark Morris because he lives a great life down there in Florida, the sunshine each and every day, enjoying himself. And the thought of him puffing on a cigar and enjoying my show makes me very happy. So, Mark, thank you so much for being here. And I just love the fact that you spend that time with us each and every day. Really appreciate that. Jeff Doak also says we don't give nearly enough hype to Fran Tarkenton. Without him, there would have been no Steve Young, no Donovan McNabb, no Michael Vick. Fran Tarkenton redefined the role of quarterback, changed the game. It's actually a really good point that Tarkenton was the first of what we think of as the mobile quarterbacks, and for his age, he was a very athletic player at that position. Here's the other thing, and I didn't realize this. You know how you can do net worth searches for celebrities and famous people? According to a lot of that stuff on the internet, Fran Tarkenton's worth like 9 figures. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Obviously, we knew that he had great success in business. I didn't realize he had as much success as he had. So Fran Tarkenton's a very interesting dude. We've had him on the show before many, many years ago. Just a very outspoken guy. I haven't heard as much from him lately, but just a very interesting guy. Obviously had a celebrity life kind of away from football. Was it? I'm going to actually talk about an old TV show when the show begins today, but was it That's Incredible? Was that the show that Fran Tarkenton was on? That's Incredible. That's predating my memory for the most part, but Tarkenton kind of had a little bit of fame even beyond just football. So he's a very interesting guy, and you're right, as a player, very good. 3 Super Bowl appearances for Tarkenton. South Florida Dog give me a hard time for the slightly late start, and I certainly I got to wear that one. But we were still in the 940s today, which is not bad. Are we on the other platforms here? All right, almost there. We'll say hello to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch in just a moment. Hassan says he thinks that Georgia now is about to go on a run like it did in the 1980s, and I think that's fun to think about. I mean, I do think it's fun to think about how you can, take that championship and you can capitalize on it and turn it into something a lot more. I would say that Georgia has a very good chance of doing just that. I think that's great. Cat Story says, I am correct. That's incredible. Jeff Doak there as well. Yeah. By the way, welcome in Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Good to see you. And thank you, Cat, and thank you, Jeff, for helping me out on that. It's funny that we're talking about this now because I'm going to talk about some version of that in a moment. It's like I just have kind of like the tiniest, faintest, vaguest memory of that TV show being a thing. Not really so much, I don't remember ever watching. I just sort of remember it existing and kind of remember Tarkenton being there on that as a very small child. Larry Wheeler checks in to say that Stafford proves it takes a team to win a championship. It takes all sections of a team: quarterback, defense, offense, and receivers. Good blocking, good coaching. Larry's exactly right about that. And that's one of the things we've also talked about ourselves here a bit, that there is an element that football is about, a word that we've heard Kirby use a few times, complementary football, that it's not about just one thing. And you can't make the game simpler than it is. Clearly, quarterback's the most important position, but does Matthew Stafford win the Super Bowl? If not for Aaron Donald and Von Miller and Leonard Floyd and those guys, that defensive front, probably not. The presence of the entirety of the roster and the success that LA enjoyed on both sides of the ball is what really helps win that national championship. I think that's exactly right, that it's really what you do there on both sides that makes such a big difference. And Stafford obviously gave LA the missing piece that it needed at quarterback, but in being that provision for them, he also got the defense he would never get with the Lions, and wide receivers, and full complement of offensive weapons. He got a lot of talent around him by going to LA. He gave them the quarterback that they didn't really have in Jared Goff, but as Larry says, it's kind of both sides of the ball where ultimately all that ends up happening. All right, good stuff. So we're going to do a bunch of fun stuff today. We'll get into the Stafford thing more in depth near the end of the show. There are a couple of interesting reports out there related to, I've told you before, that I think we need more substantial, more on-the-record reporting about name, image, likeness. A couple of media types have tried to do that. I think they've kind of fallen short. We'll get into exactly why that is. Really cool announcement from Georgia yesterday that I think fans are going to really enjoy. It could be good for the players there themselves. Also, a stern warning coming up to UGA fans. I say that jokingly. We're going to have some fun with a topic that probably deserves to be addressed. And off the top, a side of a great former Georgia player that we don't often get to see. Zamir White, very heartfelt message about exactly what winning a national championship meant to him. What do you say we start right there on that? It's a fun Wednesday to have you here. I'm glad to be here myself. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And it begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I am not the first one to say this, but I have found this to be very true. Maybe you have there as well. That ultimately we kind of define our life by moments that, people have, I think, learned that, spending money on experiences in a lot of ways is better than, say, like a tangible item, like a nice watch or nice car. Something. Now, there's anything wrong with nice watches and nice cars, but experiences are the kinds of things that people seem to enjoy spending their money on. I know for me, I definitely enjoy that. I've got a vacation here coming up in a few days. I'm really excited about that. And when you think about the kinds of experiences that you have, that it's not even... Sometimes it's not the biggest thing from the vacation that you remember, the biggest thing from Christmas that you remember. It's just kind of a small moment that kind of becomes the thing that sticks in your mind, and it is very difficult to know like how that came to be. You can't plan for it. It just kind of happens. And I think people who end up being happy in life are the kinds of people who make room for moments to just kind of occur. I don't mean to be overly philosophical, but that's one of the things I think about from time to time. So my reason for bringing all this up is that when I look back on Georgia winning the national championship, I was very lucky. I got to be in Miami for the Orange Bowl, and I had a blast with that. I got to be I was also in Indianapolis for that game, as cold as it was. What a great time that was, on the field, around the stadium, all the cool stuff associated with that. But when I think about what that experience was like, living through that at the beginning of January and going on the road with the Dogs in those two stops and being, a part of that. The stuff that I remember most are also, as I said before, they're kind of just sort of small moments, and they're kind of weird. And let me give you an example of one of these right quick. So we were there for the parade and the celebration. It was a very frustrating day because we had some, so many people, technological challenges and things like that, didn't really get to present on video some of the stuff we wanted to do. And I was very, very frustrated with that. But still, I am a Georgia fan. I've been waiting my entire life to see Georgia win a national championship. And so I was trying to stay in the moment, as aggravated as I was about some of the technical issues we were dealing with. I was trying to stay in the moment and just kind of appreciate what was happening around me. And so I was kind of standing there, the dog walk at the end of the parade was kind of, streaming by, and, a lot of players came by, kind of, give them the nod, whatever else. But it just so happened that at one point, Zamir White comes walking by, and he's, saying hello to a lot of fans around me. And it's just one of those things where it just was like the timing was right, the moment was right, was able to just kind of, stick my hand out, gave him the handshake and said, hey, congratulations on winning the national championship. Congratulations, a great season, whatever it was. I said, very short. This is a few seconds worth. But the smile that Zamir White had on his face was the kind of thing that I'll never forget, because it was such a different side of Zamir. And it was just such a cool moment to be able to share. I don't have a photograph of it. I don't have a video of it. I don't have anything that would mark it other than my own memory of it. But Zamir was just beaming with this huge smile. And obviously, and you're watching on video, you see Zamir there doing some of the press conference stuff. Zamir, I don't think ever really liked doing that very much. Does not like really talking to the media. Zamir is a guy, the old Kirby Smart line about doing your talking with your helmet. Zamir White is the kind of guy who would be more than happy to let his helmet do the talking for the entirety of his football career. He likes playing football. I don't know that he necessarily likes talking about football. And so therefore, when you see him in rare appearances with reporters, he's pretty reserved for the most part. And if you see him on the sideline, or if you see him, in a moment during a game in which, the game's in a break, I mean, he just got his game face on, man. I mean, Zamir White is a tough, tenacious competitor, and he does not turn that competitive edge down very frequently. This is a guy who's kind of, the old line about, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Zamir's one of those guys that just sort of stays ready. And so to be able to be in that moment and share that big smile, handshake, so gracious about everything, loving it with Georgia fans, kind to me there in that moment, it's just one of those things that I just won't forget. Now, my reason for bringing all this up is because Zamir White recently appeared on kind of a long-form podcast interview. Former players, Chad Ochocinco, Brandon Marshall, doing the interview, and Zamir was there. And I'm going to put a link to this when I post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com, because the full interview is worth your attention. Zamir gets into the challenge, the pressure of now moving on as a professional, getting paid to play the game on a full-time basis now, and hoping to provide for his family and all that kind of goes along with that. That's an emotional side of Zamir that's worth your attention. But as I mentioned a moment ago, for a guy like Zamir who chooses his words carefully and oftentimes would rather just let the game speak for itself and maybe sometimes not talk, to hear him in a long-form interview, as he was recently in, was actually pretty interesting. As I said before, it's worth your time to hear it. And in light of the fact that I saw with my own eyes just how happy Zamir was in the aftermath of coming to Georgia and seeing that time at UGA result in the national championship, let me let you hear Zamir with Brandon Marshall here on the subject of what the national championship meant to him. I thought this was kind of a cool way to start our show today. This is Zamir White.
Zamir, national championship.
Huge, man. Like just being there, like just playing it like that. Feel like just finally getting there, like just going through all them workouts and just grinding it out, man. Like we finally did it, and like my teammates was with me, so like we finally did it, man, and it was great.
You said huge. What does that mean, huge? Right? Really dive into that, bro.
It's really like a national championship, man. Like, but that's something like we dreamed of, like yeah, like as kids, like just growing up, bro. Like just seeing like guys like winning, like just seeing Bama winning, them guys winning, like, and like just being there and like just seeing that and like just going through it. So yeah, like it's really hard like to like explain like okay, but like I'm just blessed.
So I don't have like a big strong opinion to share with you about that comment or anything else, other than the fact that I'm glad he gets to say that, because I do know how hard these guys work. I mean, I'm not there behind the scenes, I'm not seeing on a daily basis, but I have some idea because I've talked to other players about it. I know what the grind is like, and you know, there is this thought where you kind of want it all be worth it when it's all said and done. I asked John Stinchcomb about that on Monday. You know, John won a Super Bowl playing the New Orleans Saints, and you know, it's possible to play your entire career on a bad team. It's possible to work just as hard as the guys in the good teams, but not have it pay off in championship success. And listen, I don't know that makes you less of a player because of that, but it certainly makes your memories, I would say, go back to what you said a moment ago, the moments, the experiences that we want to have to define our life. I think it makes those maybe a little less than. And so the fact that, you know, Zamir White, representing so many of these other Georgia players, gets a chance to say, yeah, we did it, sitting there amongst a bunch of other draft guys, and he gets to be the guy that says, hey, I know what it feels like to win a national championship. I just thought that was a really cool thing. And so I'll put a link to the interview. You should check it out. You know, Zamir's not a guy that likes talking very much and probably doesn't like talking about himself very much really at all, but that's kind of a cool side of him. Now, let me shift gears here for a moment and do something totally different. So when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and, you know, grandparents have a tendency to spoil their, you know, grandchildren, whatever else. I think, you know, one of the ways in which maybe my grandparents kind of spoiled me was, for the most part on TV, they sort of let me watch whatever I wanted to watch. Now, we didn't have like, you know, like the cable stuff and things like that. This is kind of, you know, this is kind of before that became, you know, all that common necessarily. But I did kind of watch, you know, a lot of network television shows, things like that. And so because of that, I was a weird child probably. And I was probably more interested in like adult TV shows than I was kid TV shows. And there was a TV show that I used to love. My grandfather was a police officer. So anything related to like police procedurals, things like that, anything related to that, I just always really loved. As a kid, I was really into that. I didn't always understand all the plot points because I was too young to understand them, but just the idea that I was getting to watch a show that was kind of more made for adults, I just always really enjoyed that. So for those of you who are kind of a certain age, do you remember the show Hill Street Blues? Now, as I said before, I was a small child when Hill Street Blues was on television, and I probably didn't have the attention span to watch the entirety of the show. But I loved the way that it started, because you had like the police captain, whatever it was, and he's up there doing the briefing session, and he's kind of telling everybody about everything. And then he would have this kind of catchphrase there at the end of his little spiel, and that would roll into the opening song for Hill Street Blues, which I still think is maybe among the best opening credit type songs in TV history. Let me give you just kind of a small snippet of this, and I promise you I'm going somewhere with this. But for those of you who may remember, this is the way the old TV show about police, Hill Street Blues, used to start. Remember this?
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out here.
So there's never a bad reason to play a little bit of the Hill Street Blues theme song. I just love that. But it's the catchphrase there at the beginning that I want to kind of bring to your mind here for a moment. Hey, let's be careful out there. Let's be careful out there. That's what the police captain guy used to always say in the briefing session to the officers before they went out about their day. But I also think from time to time we have to do a little bit of a reminder about here of, hey, y'all, let's be careful out there. Because we are in that time of year where the appetite for college football information does not go down, but the availability of college football information is pretty low right now. And there's always going to be people who try to step into the gap to satisfy the appetite for information when the availability of information is not very high. We are in kind of prime college football rumor season. I don't know. And I sort of feel like the thing that counts as a college football rumor is getting more and more shaky by the day. Like, I feel like we're seeing a good number of college football fans getting drawn off sides by things they probably shouldn't get drawn off sides by. And listen, I don't take myself too seriously. I don't think of myself as fact check guy or, I don't think of my role as combating misinformation. Like, I don't take myself seriously like that. But I do consume a lot of college football news. And I do think that it's fairly easy to spot a rumor that's probably not worth your attention. So can we spend a couple of seconds here telling us all how we can all be careful out there and not kind of fall prey to just some of the very odd rumors that I believe have gotten more attention than they deserve as of late? Let me show you this tweet on the screen here. It comes from a sports radio station near Clemson. It's called ESPN Upstate. They had a guest recently on the show. His name is Brent Beard. He's a radio host. I don't know him personally, but I've seen his name, as a radio host for a long time. So he's interviewed on the show, one of their shows, local shows there, ESPN Upstate. This is near Clemson in South Carolina. And so the tease they have about the guest is that one school starts with an A, the other starts with a T. Arch Manning seems poised to pick one of these two schools, according to Heisman voter Brent Baird. Now, if you click the link, listen to the interview, what you find out is that Brent Baird says that he thinks it's down to Alabama or Texas for Arch Manning, the five-star quarterback for the class of 2023. Now, it is not my job here and my intent here to disparage Brent Baird because I don't know him from anybody. But here's what I can tell you. If there is big news to be had on the Arch Manning front, y'all, do you think it's going to be broken by ESPN Upstate in South Carolina? I mean, come on now. We can all kind of have a sense of this. And what happens is, so the radio station tweets this out, and some of the websites that kind of chronicle tweets and kind of keep track of some of the rumors and viral things around college football, now they write about this. And they all kind of use the same peg to justify writing the story, which is, hey, a Heisman voter said this. Well, ask yourself a question. What does being a Heisman voter have to do with an Arch Manning recruiting rumor? Like, if that's the claim that validates the rumor, if that's the credential that validates the rumor, does that make any sense whatsoever? I mean, does that make any sense in relation to this whatsoever? No, this is not because I want Arch Manning to go to Georgia, and therefore I'm mad that this radio host out of the state of Alabama goes on a radio station in South Carolina and says that Arch Manning's not coming to UGA. That's not really what this is about. Now, my common sense would tell me that we have video as recently as a couple of weeks ago of Matt Luke, Kirby Smart, Todd Monken, Buster Faulkner all being on hand for a basketball game that Arch Manning is playing, that if that was just a couple of weeks ago, the idea that in the time since then that Georgia's been eliminated from this discussion, the idea of that happening so quickly doesn't make a lot of sense. But beyond that, just consider the source here for a moment. Not to disparage ESPN Upstate in South Carolina. I'm sure they serve their audience well. Or the radio host that said this. But if there is big news to be broken on Arch Manning, it's not going to come from the shadow of Clemson, South Carolina on some AM radio station connected to that. That's not likely to happen. And the reason why I bring that up is because, once again, you see another rumor starting to percolate here, and it's another one of those things where you sort of have to consider the source or consider kind of the patient zero. Like, where does all this start? Let me give you another totally different example. There's a guy named Connor O'Gara. He is a writer for Saturday Down South, and for the most part, he is a columnist. And what it means is he shares his opinions for a living. And he recently wrote an opinion-based piece regarding JT Daniels. Let me show you the screenshot of this from Connor O'Gara. I've had him on the SEC Country Live before. I don't know him well. but when I've had him on the show, I thought he was a pretty good dude. So Connor writes this. He says, this is not Connor Riley, our Connor. This is a different Connor. He says, Brian Harsin must still coach like his job is on the line in 2022. What does that mean? He needs to go out and get JT Daniels. Folks, this is an opinion. And I read the column. It's kind of interesting. I think that I don't necessarily agree with the premise, but O'Gara argues his point just fine. I like opinion pieces. I like sharing my own opinions. That's just kind of the way all of this goes. But I knew what was going to happen, that people would have a tendency to take what was an opinion piece based on nothing more than, hey, this is what I think should occur, and they were going to get confused and turn this into news, and somebody would try to step in the gap and try to, build a brand on top of all this, and lo and behold, a few minutes later, pretty much the same thing happened. Let me show you this tweet from some guy. His name is Cowboy Juarez on Twitter. He says, the JT Daniels chatter to Auburn is real. I'm being told Auburn reached out to his camp today. I understand Harsin not wanting to pin his future on the other quarterbacks who are there in the program. He says, and it may be worth the gamble to bring in JT Daniels. Now, here's the thing. There is no JT Daniels to Auburn chatter. There is a dude who wrote an opinion piece who said, I think that JT Daniels should go to Auburn. And suddenly in the crazy world of rumors that we live in, that gets turned into a thing. Now, listen, I'm not trying to scold anybody or anything like that. I'm just trying to say that, as the Hill Street Blues dude said, be careful out there. Don't get tripped up by every Arch Manning thing. Don't get tripped up by every JT Daniels thing. And we're kind of in a time now in college football where we got transfer portal, we got NIL, we got all this crazy stuff going on. There's more fertile soil for crazy rumors than ever before. And, listen, we all have been maybe confused by something in the past. I know that I have been there as well. I've been guilty of retweeting what turned out to be a fake tweet before. We've all, maybe had an example of that in the past. My point is in some cases, the fake news is actually a little easier to spot. And I would say that these couple things are an example of that. So as the Hill Street Blues one guy once told us, let's be careful out there when it comes to some of these crazy college football rumors. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 Ref, and as a podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. We are happy to have you with us as a part of the program. We'll get Mike Griffith here coming up in just a few minutes. A lot going on around UGA. Want to cover a lot of those bases there with Mike when he pops on in just a bit. Before we get ready to do that, though, I do want to do a quick version of Around the Doghouse. It's furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. And, we're kind of in a cool era of college football right now where I think there are obviously more opportunities available for players than ever before because of name, image, likeness, things like that. But that opportunity also extends to the fans there as well, because as players look to maybe cash in on their worth and their value, as in some cases the schools themselves help create paths for the players to be able to do that, it creates opportunities for fans to get closer to players or have a connection to players they've never had before. One of the things that in recent years, for instance, has been kind of hard to do is it's actually been pretty hard pre-NIL for a Georgia fan to get a Georgia player's autograph, because the program's so popular. When I was a kid, I've told you this before, like picture day was one of those things where you come stand on the practice field, you can hang out for a few hours, you could pretty much just stand there and talk to whatever player you wanted to. I used to get like these big posters, get the whole team to sign them. It was pretty easy to get almost every autograph, pose for pictures, whatever else you wanted to do. I don't know, just back in the 90s, things were just a little more casual like that. But gosh, now if Georgia had a full-on picture day, you'd have 8 gazillion people there. And I know in recent years, pre-pandemic, when they did have that, it's a little bit of a logistical challenge to manage that, to deal with that. So, pre-NIL, it was almost unheard of to be able to get a player's autograph, because there was also the weirdness of, hey, what happens when these things get put on eBay or whatever else? And, so there was just kind of a restrictive culture around autographs. Now in the NIL world, it's pretty common to see, even Georgia players, out and about signing autographs from time to time. You can kind of get that. That's an opportunity that exists for fans that didn't kind of exist before. And maybe another example of this there as well. Whereas, like in the past, if you want to go to the UGA bookstore or somewhere like that, and you wanted to get a Georgia football jersey, you kind of had one choice, right? It's almost like they had one number each and every year. Like for NFL fans, you go to NFL Shop and you could get, customized jersey, pretty much anything that you wanted. There are a lot of band phrases and things like that, but if you want whatever player you want to get, you pretty much get that. The NFL had that available for you for a long time. College football just really hasn't had that. They just hadn't had the infrastructure in place to do that. Well, now in the NIL world, apparently that's changing a little bit. Let me show you this on the screen for those of you watching. If you're listening, I'll describe it to you. So Georgia puts out the tweet yesterday. You can say you can put the champs on your back coming fall of 2022. So they're going to start offering a chance to get a customized jersey made. You can get whatever name you want, obviously that player's number. You can kind of get the full deal here. And I think that's really cool. I mean, it is a chance to get player jerseys that you just kind of wouldn't have been able to get in the past. And here's what my hope is. My hope is that I really think of Georgia fans as kind of an educated fan base. They're pretty plugged in, paying pretty close attention for the most part. And, if you go to like the average NFL stadium, it's like 95% of the people have the quarterback. But I sort of think for Georgia, it may be a little different than just the one obvious name. Like there'll be a ton of Brock Bowers, of course. And last year, you kind of know who you would have seen a lot of. But don't you kind of think of Georgia fans, once again, you use last year as an example. Like you'd have seen a lot of Jordan Davis. I know I probably would have been wearing a Jordan Davis if I were the kind of person that wore jersey. Jordan Davis would be my pick. And a nose guard wouldn't necessarily be the most common pick for a lot of teams around and a lot of fan bases around the country. But it wouldn't just be that. I mean, wouldn't you love to see some Channing Tindalls? Wouldn't you love to see some Quay Walkers? Wouldn't you love to see some Lewis Scenes? Some of the guys that are contributors and I don't want to say role players because that almost makes it sound pejorative, but not necessarily the most obvious choice. Not quarterback, not running back, not wide receiver, but the guys who are really making the strong contribution to winning. This is one of the things I'm hopeful that we see. If this is going to become a really popular thing, and I hope that it does, and I hope the players themselves get a chance to cash in on this some. But if this is going to become one of those things where, hey, we see a lot of customized Georgia jerseys in Sanford Stadium on game day, what I sort of hope is that you kind of have the full gamut of this. I'm hopefully that you see a lot of different names represented, a lot of different guys represented, showing some appreciation for all of the players who help contribute to those victories. I said before, guys like Tyndall or guys like, a Devontae Wyatt. I mean, how great would it be to have a Devontae Wyatt jersey in a situation like that, saying I'm a Georgia fan who knows what's what. I know who really is helping UGA win all these games, and it's more than just a small handful of players. I'm hopeful that we see a lot of these jerseys showing up on game day next year, and I hope Georgia fans show their appreciation for the full, width of the roster when they do that. That's Around the Doghouse. It's furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. And by the way, speaking of making a variety of choices, obviously Rooms to Go, certainly the one that'll help you do that. A lot of you had folks over for the big game this past Sunday. A lot of you excited about the upcoming spring. And, this is the time of year when you start thinking about spring cleaning or something like that, getting your home ready for the warm weather season. Well, never too soon to start thinking about that at Rooms to Go, because if you just need kind of a freshening up of your look, whether it be the individual piece of furniture or the entire room, this is what Rooms to Go can do for you. You can start your shopping experience online at roomstogo.com. Of course, that's the word two spelled out T-O. Or you can go to the store and in person and kind of sit on the stuff or lay on it, feel it, touch it. That's what I like to do. Whether it be dining room stuff or outdoor, for the patio, children's bedrooms, your own bedroom, living room, whatever else, Rooms to Go can help you get furnished up the way you need to. For the individual piece of furniture, the entire room, after all, that's what they're famous for. That's why they're called Rooms to Go. You can check them out today, and you can do so in-store or online. Roomstogo.com. Great to have them furnishing Around the Doghouse with us here today. All right, before we're done, there's some interesting stuff out there on name, image, likeness. Can't wait to touch on all of that. And, once again, still not quite providing me with what I wish we had in terms of some actual tangible, specific stuff on exactly what's going on. I think this topic still remains a little too mysterious for my taste, but we'll do some of that here in a little bit. A former NFL great has taken Matthew Stafford to task in a very weird way. We'll touch on some of that before we're done on today's show, too. And a very surprising team within the SEC is off to a fast start in recruiting. We'll cover all the bases on that there as well. But for now, on everything going on with UGA, still looking for a coach, getting ready to start spring practice, all kinds of pieces being put in place to get going on the 2022 season. Let's get ready to talk about all of that with Mike Griffith here on DawgNation Daily here today. And we'll get Mike here coming up in just a moment. Get rock and roll with him. Sorry for the delay on that. Sorry for holding you up, but we'll take some more of your comments. I'll also say this too. I've been, telling you on video, hopefully, but try to keep you up to date on all that. I do have vacation coming up. Now, we're going to have a show each and every day. And I would say that we're kind of about probably 60% of the way done in terms of, maybe about halfway done in terms of getting all these recorded right now. These are going to be some of the best vacation shows we've ever done. I've really put a lot of effort into this because I want to serve you well while I can't be here with you, and I'm always grateful that you allow me to take a little bit of time away from doing the show. We don't like to take a lot of time off. We don't like to go dark on this show very much, just because I like the idea of the daily connection of serving you there that way. So when we can't be here, we try to do right by you and have you a good product out there. So I think some of the vacation shows we're doing are going to be some of the best that we've done, and we've worked really hard to make that the case. So I can't wait to see you there on those here coming up in just a little bit. That'll be this Friday and then all the following week, Monday through Friday. So a lot of the same stuff you've come to expect. Still hear from Mike Griffith, Connor Riley, Jeff Sintel, Terrence, and John, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to cover all of that for you throughout the next week. A lot of look ahead to spring practice, but that's going to start coming up on Friday. So we'll do that there then. All right, for now, on everything going on with UGA, let's cover those bases. It's Mike Griffith today here on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Mike Griffith here on DawgNation Daily. Of course, great to have him on the program. Mike, I'll bring you in on what we were talking about just before you joined us, which is I think it's kind of cool that Georgia's going to allow these customized jerseys to be made. It's not the kind of thing that we've really seen in college football a lot over the years. If you're a fan, you kind of had the one jersey choice, and it was always going to be kind of the most obvious choice. And so if you were a fan that wanted the jersey, everybody else who wanted the jersey had the exact same one that you did. Now there's a little bit more variety, a lot more options out there. We've talked a lot about how the NIL era can potentially benefit the players, but this is also an example where it kind of potentially benefits the fans there as well, that as a way of making some money for the players, the needs of the fans, I think, are, in this case, getting served in a little bit better way.
Yeah, I think so. Although I would say, couldn't fans have always just gotten their names put on by themselves? I suppose that probably would have cost more. It's a little bit easier now to order who you want. I just wonder how many Kirby Smart jerseys we're going to see. Brandon, I did a little poll asking, who would be the most popular, and you could probably guess which player is winning by a landslide. I only put 4 choices up there, but I think the most popular is pretty obvious. But I'll bet you Kirby Smart. I bet there'll be some Kirby Smart jerseys out there too.
Well, so it is fairly common to see the Kirby Smart jerseys now, but to be technical, to be fair, if you're going to have the Kirby jersey, those in the past have been kind of the bootleg variety. There are people online. Now, I'm not – listen – I don't officially condone anything like this, but there are people online that offer the chance to make a very close facsimile of a Georgia jersey, and that's so when you see the 16s in the stands, that is what you're seeing. You are seeing someone who is taken upon themselves to be a craftsman and make their own jersey. So the official position here on DawgNation Daily is that folks should not do that, and that everything that folks wear of the Georgia variety should be officially licensed. But I have been told that there are people out there that do that. So just to be clear about that.
Now, what I would do, and I don't have any player jerseys, but if I did, if I were George, I would get Smart and then one, kind of like a word play, like Smart One.
Okay.
So number one, Smart. That would be. That's how I would do it. That would be my clever way of being the cool Joe. But there's a lot of fun names on the team too, right? Look, just Ringo's name. Just the name Ringo, the fact that he made the game-clinching play is one thing, but I think everybody likes that name Ringo. I think it's a popular name.
I think that's right there as well. And, one of the things I've said about Georgia fans is Georgia fans kind of have, I believe, a reputation, justifiably so, of being pretty savvy, of being pretty sophisticated, that, you go to an NFL stadium, you see everybody has the same jersey. It's all the quarterback, or it's the top running back, or, whatever else, that in a place like Georgia where the fans are, I believe, watching the game so closely, like if this was a year ago, not only would you have seen some Jordan Davises and, guys like that, but, hopefully, Channing Tindall or Lewis Seen or players that were in kind of a contributing role, not necessarily the star guy, not the guy that's on the cover of the media guide necessarily, but someone whose importance to the team was just as valuable as anybody else. that in a season like last year, had these jerseys been available, my hope would be that you would have seen kind of a varied taste amongst Georgia fans of who you would have, seen show up on Sanford Stadium.
I agree. And I think for the really forward thinking, I want to see the Georgia fans that show up at the G-Day game wearing Manning jerseys. Now that is an aggressive move.
Yeah, that would be pretty clever. That would be pretty clever. Now, if you go to the NFL shop, there are a lot of banned phrases. I'm guessing that maybe for now, promoting a prospective student athlete, it's hard to know if anything's an NCAA violation anymore. But promoting a prospective student athlete may still be an NCAA violation. But that's a pretty good idea, though, Mike. I kind of like the idea of that. Hey, let me transition to something else for a moment. There have been a lot of chatter last few days about Georgia's search for what I assume is a defensive backs coach. There had been a report about Zach Etheridge. Then he kind of went on Twitter and said he's staying at Auburn. There had been some chatter about Mike Reed, the very well-credentialed Clemson defensive backs coach, who I guess some of that seems to have now fizzled out a bit here. What can you tell us about the ongoing search for what we think is going to be a defensive backs coach there at UGA?
I don't want to think that budget's got a lot to do. I kind of want to see how these salaries shake out, Brandon. I think we're expecting to hear the salaries in the next day or two. I think the Todd Monken negotiation. I'm kind of eager to see that. I'm not really sure. I think it's got to be the right fit, and I suggested a while ago when I think we've talked about this the last couple of weeks now that Kirby is not one to rush these defensive hires. He's much quicker on the trigger on the offensive hires. But on the defense, this is somebody that's got to be able to work with him every day, assuming it's a defensive backs coach, which, again, who's to say, right? I'm not sure. Do they have a special teams coach right now? Does he want to go back in that direction? Could him and Will split those responsibilities like him and Mel Tucker did in 2017, and then that frees you up to hire someone else? Or, to the point I think you and Connor had made, you've got 5 DBs on the field now the majority of the time, and that what's really a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5. Maybe you need that extra guy. So I'm not sure where that's at, but what we do know is that Kirby is not one to rush these decisions, and there's still plenty of guys out there that want to come and work for Kirby Smart, but I think it needs to be the perfect fit, and that may be shaken out, and he may be talking to multiple people about potential different position coach opportunities.
And the point that I've also made on this as well, which is that, and I'm going to speak as a fan here for a moment, that I don't get stressed out if a guy like Etheridge was rumored to be in the mix and then he says he's staying at Auburn, or a guy like Mike Reed was rumored to be in the mix and then additional rumors come out saying, no, he's actually not going anywhere. I don't get too stressed out about that, because I'm a big believer that if you're doing a coaching search and you only limit that search to people that you will say yes, that won't potentially use your interest to get more money somewhere else, or to have a chance to kind of flex when they decide, to stay or whatever else. That I think that sometimes that those of us who care about college football, be it fans, media, whatever else, make too big of a deal of a coaching search that lasts longer than 5 seconds, or a coaching search that includes more than 1 or 2 names, some of which kind of fizzle out before they turn into anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with turning over every single stone. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, hey, let's find out if this guy, there's some upheaval in the Clemson staff for the first time in kind of a long time. Let's find out if that maybe causes, this guy to want to leave, or, at one point in time you thought the Auburn head coach may be going. Does that make one of their assistant coaches want to look around a little bit more? I don't think there's anything wrong with coaching staff, in this case Kirby Smart, doing that. It's very hard to keep anything a secret in college football anymore, and if that creeps out and it becomes public, to me it's no harm, no foul. What do you think about that?
Oh, I don't think it's any harm at all. I think that it's good that there's a lot of interest. I think it's good that, Georgia could be looking at a lot of different candidates. And to your point, I think it's fairly typical. I think you got to ask yourself this for this position too. If it was a secondary coach, you're not really coming to Georgia to retire as a DB coach based on the track record of people that have worked under Kirby Smart at that position. This will be the 4th DB coach in the last 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. So you're basically coming here for 1 stop, maybe 2 years, 3 tops, and then you're moving on to the next. And it's a parallel move probably, or maybe even if, knowing the where George is at, maybe it's a former D coordinator that would have to take a half step down to work on this staff. So it's a position if it is indeed a secondary coach position. And I don't know that we're sure about that, but I think it's a lot to think about on both ends. I think Georgia does pay competitively, but to me the underlying theme here is Kirby wants to find the right fit, and we've been through this before. Corey Raymond was a guy when he was at LSU that Georgia was involved with a few years ago, and you thought, boy, but it just wasn't the right fit. He teaches differently than Kirby does, right? And Kirby wants people that are going to do what he tells them to do. And I don't think Jamal Adai was necessarily in lockstep on some teaching methodology. So I think Kirby's going to take his time with it. I think a lot of names may be interested, but ultimately I think you just got to trust that Kirby's going to make the right moves because, he really has. I mean, he's made some really good hires.
No, there's no doubt about that. Brock Bowers news here this week. Obviously we knew he was dealing with the issue going back to the postseason in January that had been talked about amongst Kirby Smart. And I think the general thought is, hey, you've seen the labrum thing, keep Nakobe Dean off spring practice a year ago, and clearly that didn't bother him once the season began. And Georgia's obviously very deep at the tight end position. Other guys get their look now, maybe more deeply. Certainly fans will get a better look at them on G-Day without Brock Bowers being there. But what do you make of the Brock Bowers injury situation right now and the door this opens up for some other tight ends?
Well, we knew that there were multiple injuries, after the season. I think we talked about it at some point that he was probably going to miss parts of spring. We just didn't know to what degree, and at the time we were being told that he was going to see if he could try to go through it without surgery. Obviously, that decision's been made now after probably some PT time. But Georgia does a great job of getting these guys, back on the field. You mentioned Nakobe Dean. I mean, that's a prime example. Certainly Brock is a guy that knows the playbook well and a proven commodity. And you're right. I mean, there's a silver lining to this, and then it gets other people some reps. And, Darnell Washington in particular. Now, Darnell was heavily targeted by JT Daniels last spring as well. But I think he needs some love. I mean, I think Darnell Washington is a guy Georgia's still fighting to keep. I mean, he's sticking around for spring, but there's no guarantee he'll be there in the fall. So I think this is an opportunity, like you said, to get some other guys some work, particularly Darnell, and see if you can keep Big Zero in the fold.
I'll finish up with this. You got a piece up at DawgNation.com right now about Georgia's returning production, or at least on the defensive side of the ball, the lack thereof. And I think one of the things that's going to be very interesting about Georgia, and you see this right now in some of the preseason chatter about Alabama and the fact that, well, Alabama is also losing a lot off its offense, and big-time receivers are gone, and there is the assumption, well, Alabama is still going to be Alabama, that they'll replace it, whether it's Jermaine Burton transferring in or whatever else. They're going to replace departed guys and be good at that spot because that is what Alabama has a recent history of being able to do. And on the Georgia defense, I think it'll be interesting to see if the same thing proves to be true there as well. Now, over the course of the Kirby Smart era, which dates back to 2016, you don't really see an example of a bad Georgia defense. The 2020 season was probably the worst, and that, who knows how the pandemic impacted that. Didn't really seem like many people were playing defense very much across the board at all, back there that season. But the point is that can Georgia establish a similar level of credentials in that folks seem to know that Alabama's always going to have a great offense because that's always what Alabama does? Can Kirby and Will Muschamp and Glenn Schumann and the defensive staff here, can they take a situation where there is no Jordan Davis, there is no Devontae Wyatt, there is no Trayvon Walker, there is no Nakobe Dean, Lewis Seen, some of the great players in recent UGA history all gone, and find a way to maybe not match the historic level of that Georgia defense, but certainly create a top shelf defense once again? To me, that's going to be, in terms of the preseason conversations and the lack of returning production, that's going to be one of the most important conversations I believe that happens around this program.
Yeah, and I just, a couple things. One, I reflect on Kirby talking about how they were behind everybody else in the portal, right? Because they played so deep into the season. So that was one thing, that Georgia wasn't early on some of these transfers that other guys. And I think, too, I think Kirby really does want to give everybody on the team a shot at it this spring and kind of see how it shakes out before he really addresses the needs. And I think there's probably players in other programs that kind of want to see how things go in the spring. But I would really be surprised, Brandon, if we didn't see one or at least one, if not two, veteran players for a defensive front seven transfer in. There had been some smoke around, a talented Clemson defensive lineman. Maybe you have an interest in Georgia. You wonder, how does that play out? You wonder where, could NIL be fitting into this? Could it take Georgia? Because Georgia admittedly is a little behind others in how they're handling the NIL. They haven't been as aggressive as some other schools. And, we've talked about it. We don't want to believe that NIL is a make or break situation to get a key player, but I think it is a factor. And I think at Georgia, they're a little behind on how they're not tremendously. It's not breaking the program or anything, but they're not quite as aggressive as some of the other schools, maybe Alabama, and how they're able, or Florida, and how they're able to land these transfers. But I'll bet you that by the end of spring, if Kirby Smart has a few players targeted, that there'll be some deals in place and they'll be able to get who they want. So I'm not panicking. I recognize, the same weaknesses you do. You've been talking about them really even since before the end of the season. We recognized this front seven was going to lose a lot. And now you just see it in black and white in that article. You're like, oh my goodness, 122nd in the nation out of 131 teams in returning defensive production. That really is stark. Even with Beal and Christopher Smith and Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith coming back. So I think Kirby will answer those questions as needed in the portal. But first things first, I think he wants to give a lot of these incoming players and some of these returning players the opportunity to win these jobs before he addresses them with transfers.
So we'll finish with this then. If I were to make my list of positions that I think are most likely to have a transfer eventually added, you mentioned, front seven. I would say edge rusher, that outside linebacker type role. That's a place where I could see Georgia maybe looking to add a veteran. My next position probably be wide receiver. And then if I guess I had to add a third, I might think safety. I would go edge rusher, wide receiver, safety. If I were to ask you, not necessarily rank them, but just a small handful of positions where you think most likely that Georgia would be looking to add a transfer, are your positions the same as mine?
I think a corner. I think I'd like to see a veteran corner still. I know Ringo finished well, but I think I'd like to see a veteran cornerback would be something I'd want to see. Another Darian Kendrick guy. And, I'd like to see another defensive lineman. I'd like to see a veteran defensive lineman, particularly if you can get a superstar, which, again, there's been the buzz about that. The receivers, I feel pretty good about that. Obviously the tight ends are strong. I think the running backs are good. I know Kirby mentioned numbers, but you've got 5 now. And I'll tell you, and I've heard this just from a few people, and I don't know if there's any steam whatsoever behind this, Brandon. I'm just going to say that. I'm going to warn you, this is going to be one of those left field ones that sometimes you cringe. But I've heard people ask me, are you sure JT Daniels is going to end up transferring? I think he is. I think he is. But I've had a couple people say, what if he decided to stick around? I don't know. It's just that one's out there. I don't have any information. I want to be clear on that. But I have heard from a few people start to speculate. And I kind of shrug and go, I don't know. They were after Caleb Williams. I don't know if that's the same thing or not.
Well, that is certainly very interesting, Mike. I appreciate your thoughts on all of that. And, of course, we'll look forward to reading you coming up in the next several days at DawgNation.com. You were also good enough to share some time with us yesterday as a part of one of my vacation week shows for next week. I certainly appreciate that. So certainly appreciate your time here. And whatever happens the rest of the way here, spring practice around the corner, we will be following it wherever it goes.
I appreciate it, Brandon. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Mike.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, we'll transition here, getting ready to cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean, and I am cruising myself here coming up there as well. Now, still a part of the DawgNation cruise coming up in April, which I'm really excited about. But got my own Royal Caribbean cruise coming up. I need a vacation. I just need one so bad. And listen, I love doing the show every day. Like, I got the greatest job in the world. I do truly believe that. There's no job I'd rather do other than, talk Georgia football with all of you each and every day. How could you not love doing that? But I've also done it now many consecutive days, so looking forward to a great vacation. We've actually got a great week's worth of vacation shows. It's going to start this Friday, going to extend the following week after that. Probably some of the best pre-recorded vacation shows we've done. Mike Griffith, some good stuff from him. The entire cast of DawgNation folks. A lot of this geared towards the start of spring practice. So boy, oh boy, you better believe I am excited about being on my own Royal Caribbean cruise coming up. I'm going to tell you all the details about that too, because it's just going to be so much fun, and I cannot wait to do all this with you. And for a lot of you, you're also going to be planning on joining us for the DawgNation cruise there as well. And we are so close to being able to do all that with you, coming up April 25th to 29th on Independence of the Seas. So we're going to be going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay, going to be going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to be doing so many fun things right there. So many of you have already been booked up. You're ready to go. Others of you are like, hey, I'm ready to do this there now as well. So when you start seeing and hearing about some of the cool things that I'm doing, it's going to, I think, get you even more excited about getting a chance to do some of this with us there as well, because the only thing better than taking a Royal Caribbean cruise is taking a Royal Caribbean cruise with all of you to hang out and, you know, sort of show you some of the cool things we do around DawgNation, some of the fun stuff around all of that. So we got some great stuff coming up with you there. So check out the Cruise and Vacation Authority, tcava.com. That's tcava.com. Or give them a call, 770-952-8300, 770-952-8300. We're going to be on the Independence of the Seas in April, hanging out with DawgNation and just having a good time. So cannot wait to have you on board. I'm very excited about my own ship here coming up there as well. This is just a great time of year. Get some sunshine, enjoy the gorgeous ports and private islands, Perfect Day, Coco Cay, everything else when it comes to Royal Caribbean. And, of course, if we're booking a Royal Caribbean cruise, whether it be the DawgNation cruise coming up, my own cruise, you better believe I'm leaning on my friends, the Cruise and Vacation Authority, because they know the Royal Caribbean choices and the variety. They know all that very well. So you can check them out, tcava.com or 770-952-8300. All right, let's dive in here now. Let's go cruising on the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And there was a very interesting piece at The Athletic yesterday by David Ubben. Is it Ubben? Ubben, I'm not quite sure how to say his last name. But he's writing about the collective that's being formed to benefit University of Tennessee athletes. And what this basically is like a pool of business leaders and creating a fund that can actually even be contributed to by even small-scale donors. That creates a large pool of money that can be siphoned in the direction of Tennessee athletes. Now, I've told you that, hey, I want to see some substantial, on-the-record, factual reporting about name, image, likeness. With all due respect to Ubben here at The Athletic, this to me does not rise to that level. I want to give you a specific reason why. So in the story at The Athletic, one of the leaders of the collective for Tennessee is quoted, and he's saying, hey, you know, this thing is going to be $25 or $30 million. That's how much money we're going to have in this fund to support Tennessee athletes. But in this particular case, how much money we are going to have is doing an awful lot of work. Like, that's just such a grandiose claim. Maybe that turns out to be true, but that is a projection on the part of someone who would maybe have a little bit of an incentive to make himself sound like a big shot while talking to a reporter. This does not rise to the level of being a fact. But in terms of the money that this collective, which has existed, has already paid out to Tennessee athletes, that was the kind of thing, and it's a subscription article. You'd have to obviously pay for it to read it. But if you read the article, that's what you'll see is when it comes to, well, how much money did you pay Hendon Hooker? Oh, we don't want to talk about that. That's the quarterback, obviously had a very good year. You know, we're going to keep that a secret. That we don't want our competitors to know how much money we're offering here. And that's what's got to change. Now, listen, you can't force a guy to talk about what he doesn't want to talk about. But, you know, hearing your grandiose claim of what you're going to do while sidestepping the chance to tell me what you already have done, that's not helping the name, image, likeness conversation. And it creates a big, juicy headline of how big this is, how many millions of dollars are supposedly going to be thrown around in the future. But it's just absent the kind of facts. One of those things where, like, when I read an NIL story, I'm scrolling through to find the facts. And you can just scroll from the beginning of the article to the end, and all you see is conjecture and, you know, grandiosity and whatever else, that there is just so little on the record. And I can't tell if this is just media who's kind of cheerleading for this story, and so therefore anything that kind of sounds juicy in a headline, they don't want to ask too many questions because they don't want the value of the headline to go down, or if they're just being tripped up by words that have meanings they ought to understand better. For instance, there's a collective that has already been established at Texas, and if you read a lot of stories about this collective, once again, a bunch of business leaders pooling money together as a way of supporting Texas, you find out that, it's already got $10 million worth of commitments from Texas boosters. But the word commitment here is just a fancy way of saying pledge. And the word pledge, for anybody who's ever done a church campaign or anything like that, it'll tell you that pledge is just a fancy way of saying I owe you. In other words, ask UGA when it comes to its own, McGill Society and things like that, what the difference between pledge donations and actual donations ends up being, and there's usually a pretty big gap in between all of that. That even in cases where you think you have a factual statement about NIL, when you actually dig a little deeper, you find out, well, no, it's actually not quite maybe what it was purported to be. Now you may say, well, B, why do you care? Like, why does it matter what is and isn't real when it comes to all this kind of stuff? Here is the concern that I have, is that there are a lot of people who want radical change to college football. They don't like the system. They think the system is some sort of tyranny, and they want to topple it. They want like a year zero style reformation for college football, where everything that's old is completely tossed into the trash and everything that's new starts over again in some sort of cultural revolution. That's what they're hoping for. And I think one of the tools that people like that would potentially use in their toolbox is, well, my gosh, this NIL stuff's already as crazy as it is. What does a little more change? What's the difference? Might as well just bring even more change, given how crazy NIL actually is. But if you really look deep at what's going on in college sports right now, what can be substantiated on the record, what you find out is that for the overwhelming number of college football players, NIL just hasn't had much of an impact on them at all. And yes, there's this wild claim about, Bryce Young being worth $2 million, or, Tennessee is going to have $30 million, or A&M's already had $30 million. But nobody on the record's validating any of this, and no one's got a paper trail supporting any of that kind of monetary stuff whatsoever. And ultimately, as I've told you a million times before, that if you're a coach, Big State U, and you're trying to run your team and keep guys happy, keep guys in the program, the biggest threat to your stability as a coach is not the fact that another program is going to pay them money to leave. It's the fact that there are rumors and reports out there of all this money being thrown around, and players starts to worry, well, gosh, if so-and-so is getting this money, why am I not getting this money? But when you actually dig deep, you can't even find all that much evidence that so-and-so has really even gotten that much money, because ultimately the kind of NIL deals that seem to be the most common here are the kinds of things that might have a monetary value, free meals at a restaurant or chance to drive a car or something along those lines, but actually not cash payment, folding money into your pocket. And I just think we got to have a little more on the record, substantial reporting about what's going on. And so far, the people who've tried to give it to us, I don't think it's quite risen to that level just yet. All right, a couple other stories here real quick. This is kind of an interesting curiosity. Guess who is off to a very fast start when it comes to the 2023 recruiting class? If you go to 247sports.com, if you look at their composite rankings, you see Georgia number 2, no big surprise there. Notre Dame's currently number 1, which they obviously won't stay there, but give them credit for that right now. But guess who's number 3? The Arkansas Razorbacks with Sam Pittman, number 3 in the 2023 recruiting cycle right now. They've gotten a good number of big-time recruiting wins. Now, kind of a weird anomaly in the fact that they've got 3 4-star tight ends committed to the program, which is kind of interesting, but they also got a big commitment yesterday from Quincy Rhodes, a 4-star edge rusher. Yeah, there you go, Quincy Rhodes out of North Little Rock High School. Now, listen, there are not a ton of big-time prospects from the state of Arkansas, so when you get a chance to get a big-time prospect, you look to do that. But Rhodes here, 4-star edge rusher, committed to Arkansas. So Sam Pittman, 9-win season a year ago, been a pretty good, factor in the recruiting portal, or I should say the transfer portal for the most part. It seems like they've probably done a little better in terms of who they brought in than they've lost. And all of a sudden now doing what, gosh knows. Like, I think you can make a case that Pittman's predecessor at Arkansas, Chad Morris, may have been the worst recruiter of head coaches in recent SEC history. So Pittman's pretty clearly changing that pretty quick. So that's kind of nice to see. One more thing real quick here. There is all kinds of turmoil going on in Conference USA where, I don't know, that league's even going to exist anymore. So you've got Marshall, Old Dominion, Southern Mississippi. They are all, I guess, leaving for the Sun Belt, and they're trying to do that now. And there's all kinds of, UAB had kind of funny tweet about this. There's all kinds of thought of, okay, so as they're trying to accelerate this process, and, the Conference USA is trying to play hardball on this, like, what is the future of this league in general, and how quickly is all of this unraveling? It's kind of below the radar of what we typically talk about here, but you've gotten used to Conference USA being a thing, given all the departures of the league to the Sun Belt. Not quite so sure how much longer that's going to be true. So with that, we'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let me also transition this for a moment. So we've talked a lot about Matthew Stafford this week, and great Super Bowl win, great validation of his career after really spending a long time on a losing team there in Detroit. I think the thing that's actually been the coolest to see about Stafford is the way in which so many folks who had a connection to him in Detroit seem to be happy for his success there in L.A. Clearly, Lions fans have rooted for him, which is kind of a nice thing to see. But you saw a great message, for instance, from Calvin Johnson, who had kind of a cool take on hey, from one Yellow Jacket to a Bulldog, congratulations on winning the Super Bowl. Like, a lot of Stafford's former Lions teammates seem to truly be very happy for his success, which ultimately that may be the biggest validation of who Stafford has been as a player more than anything else, the fact that people who played with him are happy to see him leave and go somewhere else. They seem to be really happy for him on that. If you want to go back for a moment to when Stafford came out of high school, class of 2006, and I think I've said this on the show before, that he was already pegged as a future number 1 overall draft pick in the NFL, and it turned out to be that. And after all this time, has kind of validated that draft status by now being a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's like top 10 all time in passing yards. It's just been a really sensational career, and the fact that he has stayed so well adjusted seemingly through the entire thing, I think that speaks really well of Stafford. I think I would think that was true whether he was a former Georgia guy or not. But obviously in the world of sports, we can't just keep it at that. I told you on one of our other shows earlier this week that what sports fans have a tendency to want to do is we want to argue about things. And arguing about sports is our way of showing love for sports, but sometimes those arguments just sort of seem ill-placed and maybe ill-timed, and maybe Stafford's been the unfair recipient of some of that right now, because in the aftermath of Stafford winning the Super Bowl, there has been some chatter, and I think that his coach, Sean McVay, actually accelerated some of this. But hey, maybe Matthew Stafford's supposed to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame now. As I said before, huge stat line for his career, now a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and that's going to create this conversation where all of a sudden now what started out as a celebration of Stafford, because sports fans are going to argue about stuff, now it turns into a little bit of a refutation of him a little bit, and kind of all of a sudden now he's getting his name dragged through the mud. It's so bizarre. Richard Sherman, of course, you know him, former great defensive back in the NFL. He's got a podcast, I guess. Who doesn't? But on Twitter this week, he also got some attention because really made a strong case for why he believes that Stafford does not belong in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Let me read this here for a moment. This is Matthew Stafford on Twitter. It says, I'm going to talk about this in the podcast, but the Hall of Fame bar right now is incredibly low. Like a participation trophy. No all-decade team, no all-pro, no MVP, 1 Pro Bowl, not even the MVP of the Super Bowl. Never considered the best player in any year that he played. At least Matt Ryan has an MVP. That's Richard Sherman weighing in a forceful way on Matthew Stafford. Leave this up for a second if you don't mind. So let me just say this. There is one thing that Sherman says here that I do think is worth consideration, which is that the Football Hall of Fame and the candidacy for the Pro Football Hall of Fame is a little bit different than, like, say, Major League Baseball or basketball or something like that, in that football has designations that other sports kind of don't really have. Like, there is really no difference between being a Major League Baseball All-Star, and it's like you could be voted as a starter by the fans, you could be selected as a reserve. We don't really know the difference in all of that. Basketball, kind of the same way. I guess you get the All-NBA teams in basketball, but I don't really quite know, there's like 3 of those. But football does have like an all-pro team. That's different than the Pro Bowl team. You got 8 gazillion Pro Bowlers, but you got 2 all-pros each position. So there is a designation there that's a little bit separate than just the run-of-the-mill all-star Pro Bowl type guy or whatever else. MVP in the NFL has always mattered, and things like that. So Richard Sherman is right that football has got some benchmarks in place to judge greatness that other sports might not really have. But I think the timing on this is just all wrong. It's like, save your hot take for something else. Save it for your podcast, but don't pollute it on Twitter and get all the Skip Baylesses and Stephen A. Smiths now, trying to, take what should be a celebratory moment for Matthew Stafford and kind of all of a sudden now kind of, drag his name through the mud about maybe why he should not be in the Hall of Fame. I don't mind telling you. I had never considered Matthew Stafford as a Pro Football Hall of Famer before he won the Super Bowl. I don't mind telling you that. You can take that down now. I'm all done with that. I don't mind. I don't mind telling you that I never really considered that prior to all of this. But, the idea that all of a sudden now we've got to use the Super Bowl win for Stafford as a springboard to talk about what's wrong with him as a player. To me, what's wrong here is Sherman's insertion of himself into a topic that ultimately doesn't really have anything to do with him. And then I guess one more final point on this too, and then we'll wrap up. As I got a little older too, I'm just a little bit more open to inclusive halls of fame. I used to be maybe of the belief that Sherman is, that letting more people into the Hall of Fame watered it down. I don't think that's true anymore. I certainly don't think it's a participation trophy, because you're still talking about a relatively small number of players to have played the game. Like, is the Baseball Hall of Fame made less if Dale Murphy's included? I would say no. The same thing for Andrew Jones there as well. And I'm sure there are a couple of names like that from other sports franchises that I don't care as much about, who their fans kind of make the same kind of case. Is that, as time passes, we just have a tendency to forget some very good players or some great players who've played the sport. And if being in the Hall of Fame allows their memory to be carried on a little longer, then to me, more power to you. I mean, it's a museum after all. So, reducing the number of people that you celebrate in that museum, as I get older, that starts to make a little less and less sense to me. One quick thing before we wrap up here today. Don't forget about our friends at BetUS. Moving into basketball season and college and pro and whatever else, you can always get some action down with our friends at BetUS and take advantage of a great offer. Listen, honestly, getting ready for the big tournament coming up in March, or as said before, action around the NBA as you head towards the postseason there. Always more fun to watch the games. You got a little action down on the games, and always great to start your betting process with more money in your account than you even put there yourself. That's what BetUS does for you. BetUS.com for more on that. Promo code DN125. The DN stands for DawgNation. Use the promo code DN125, and you get 125% sign-up bonus. That means you put in money, BetUS puts more money into your account to start with than you did. You are literally a winner before you even win your first bet. That's why BetUS has been so beloved, America's most beloved sports book for more than 25 years. And you can find out yourself when you open your account. BetUS.com, promo code DN125. Make sure you take advantage of that today. All right, we'll wrap up here with a golden shoe. Of course, our buddy Eddie always loves that. You see the gorgeous painting of him there on our wall. And, of course, golden shoe time. The way Eddie got started around here was the idea that somehow Georgia was some sort of blind squirrel program who was lucky to have found a nut. Well, guess what? Georgia's the reigning national champion now. Been dragging Florida for years, ever since Dan Mullen, who's, by the way, nowhere to be found, ever since he said that. So let's give a golden shoe today in honor of that very point. No golden shoe? Okay, so I guess we don't have that for today, but nonetheless, had some fun stuff related to that a little earlier, and so we'll check that out then. By the way, how about Gator Hater Updater? Lousy, stinking Gators. Boy, long times they won a national championship. 4,787 days. 4,787 days. And our Gator Hater Countdown, Georgia back in Jacksonville, 255 days from right now. Getting a win against those Gators then. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily. Talk to you then, everybody. Hang it on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. R.S. Andrews, you can trust them to do all of that for you here today. All right, we got a lot to do around here today. I got some shows to get ready for you, so we're not going to go super long on the comment front, but we'll look forward to getting a few of those on DawgNation.com and on Facebook and on YouTube and everything else. We'll look forward to doing that with you, and obviously just having a great time with everything else. So hope you're all doing well today, and we will get those. Let me do DawgNation.com first. I haven't started with them in a while. You got a little more Hill Street Blues right there. He likes that. Good stuff there. Hassan also weighing on the topic of Matt Ryan and his Hall of Fame candidacy. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a strong feel. I just don't have a strong feeling about it. I never really thought about it for Matthew Stafford. I mean, to me, the Stafford thing, because he does have the Super Bowl, seems a little easier to validate. You're talking about, quarterbacks who obviously have huge stat lines, but they've also played in an era in which the ball is thrown more than it used to be. So if you told me I could put one of two guys in, I'd put Stafford in over Ryan. Now, Ryan, you say, has got the MVP. Stafford's got the Super Bowl ring. It's not Ryan's fault that he lost that Super Bowl, obviously. But to me, if you're going to force me to choose one or the other, Stafford or Ryan, I think I'm probably going to choose Matthew Stafford there, I think. Cat Story likes the Hill Street Blues there as well. Big Natty Dog also checking in on Tom Brady here. Jerry Lloyd says that Mel Kiper predicted that Matthew Stafford would be the number one overall pick right after he signed with UGA, and that's right. I remember that. And I'm telling you right now, it is not easy to prevent that from making you weird. Like when you are that kind of football prodigy, someone who was, Georgia signed a lot of big-time quarterbacks, but I don't know that anybody even like Justin Fields or, guys like that. I don't know that anybody kind of had the, because you got to remember, 2006 was a very different kind of time. Recruits in general just weren't quite as famous then as they are now. But Stafford cut through all of that. He cut through all of that. Was so well known as a high school player, kind of like the stereotypical, the big quarterback from Texas. There was kind of a persona that you wanted to attach to him, and you had Kuiper saying what he was saying, unusual at the time for a guy like Kuiper to be paying any attention whatsoever to a recruit. And Stafford, for the most part, lived into that role. And as I said before, the fact that his teammates in Detroit seem to have liked him, I think that's kind of nice. I think that, you want to know what he is as a guy. The fact that people are happy for his success probably tells you all you need to know. Big Natty Dog says an NIL deal could be impacting JT's decision. Yeah, I don't know about that. If I had to guess, just to be frank, there's probably a little bit of a wait and see on JT from an NIL standpoint, but maybe so. Maybe so. Let's see. Quirky Dan. Now, we still call them the lousy stinking Gators earlier. Yeah, we still call them that. Actually, I have a funny golden shoe we're going to do next week related to the lousy stinking Gators theme that I've had for a couple days and had a chance to share. Indoor Cycling Association. Is Archie Manning not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame? I did not know that. I did not know that Archie Manning's not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting. I think that's part of maybe why I don't have a super strong take on some of these Hall of Fame quarterbacks is the fact that I'm frequently surprised by who is and who isn't in some of these Halls of Fame. Like, for instance, any of the quarterbacks in this era, if they were to go in, they won't be the worst quarterback in the Hall of Fame because that space will be occupied here and forever by Joe Willie Namath. And this just goes to show you like the bias that exists with so much of this kind of stuff. It's like, and listen, Namath is, obviously before my time, but a very cool dude. And Super Bowl III, I know that's such a historic event, for the growth of pro football. I understand all of that. But, go look at Namath's stat line for his career. The fact that he's in the Hall of Fame, we've already got some issues with who's in the Hall of Fame already. Like, the notion that Matt Ryan or Matthew Stafford or any of those guys would be cheapening the process by being in there. I would say that Joe Willie's already taken care of all that. All right, let's see what else. Keith Wold says there are always going to be those lousy, stinking Gators. You better believe that. You better believe that for sure. Thomas Ferguson says that he thinks that Matthew Stafford underachieved at UGA. I don't know. I guess if you want to take the moment after he wins the Super Bowl to say he underachieved at Georgia, I guess you can do that. But, was there disappointment? Of course there was. Preseason number 1, 2008, you don't really finish anywhere close to that way. But he was also playing a pretty big brand of football for this team at the end of 2007. And at the time, that was a pretty big deal. So, I guess for me, that's probably the thing I'd remember more than anything else. Robert Maloney says looking at raw numbers amidst an era of rule changes favorable to offensive players isn't exactly even exchange. The player Stafford will be sandwiched between. He pales in comparison to the impact they've made. Sherman is a strong point. He says, but Stafford's playing days aren't numbered. That's another important thing there as well, is that he's coming back next year. And, we see a lot of players who, have late career exploits that kind of change the way they are thought of. For instance, like I was, a kid in the 80s, John Elway was kind of this guy who was thought of as a, kind of a good player, but man, that team can't quite get over the hump. And then, Elway finished his career with back-to-back Super Bowl wins. And, those late 90s Broncos teams were some of the best in modern times. And all of a sudden, that's a total reimagining of who Elway was as a player. He was already good before that, but all of a sudden, he was kind of like once he got Terrell Davis, got that running game in place, all of a sudden, who Elway was as a player late in his career, completely reimagined. Somebody said, who are the actors on Hill Street Blues? Could I name an actor on that show? there was a famous, like, I want to say Denzel Washington, but he was on Saying Elsewhere, wasn't he? There's somebody super famous was on Hill Street Blues, but I can't remember who that was. I probably couldn't name any of the actors. I just remember the show. Ryan Walker, very funny. Matt Rukavina says any underachievement that occurred during the Stafford era wasn't his fault. Let's get serious here. And I think that's probably true. Plus, when, like the Stafford team that he played on in 2006, that's his true freshman season. Now, he was a young guy, and he had some up and down moments that year, but that was not the same level of Georgia team that had existed kind of before that and even kind of after that. That was not, I would say, a crazy talented team. But by the end of the year, they were playing great. At one point in time, Georgia in that era, and Steve Spurrier pointed this out, which always made me very mad, but there was a point in like 06 into 07 where Georgia had lost its most recent game against everyone in the SEC East. I mean, can you believe that? That's pretty crazy, right? Had lost its most recent game to everyone in the SEC East. And, obviously, that kind of changed. But that's a little bit of a struggling era for Georgia. That 06 season almost went completely off the rails. But Georgia went to Auburn, which is the site of a lot of get-right games for UGA. Went to Auburn. Auburn was they're definitely top 10. Were they top 5? Top 5 Auburn. Georgia beat them, 24-3. Great a fun bowl game to go back and rewatch was the comeback. Georgia was down 24-3 at the half to Virginia Tech, came back and won in the Peach Bowl. That's a fun game. So, that was one of those things where kind of a bad team early 2006 eventually gave way to really pretty good conclusion. So I did not know this. So Bill Sanders says the Hill Street Blues song was a hit song before it became a theme song for the show. I had no idea that was true. Is that right? I had no idea. I had no idea of that. That's pretty interesting. Van Bird says, why does one news article say Arch Manning's down to Alabama and Texas, and 5 minutes later, not true, and Florida and LSU are now in the mix, which with UGA and Ole Miss. So I don't know anything about Florida or LSU on that, but the problem with the news article is, and we talked about this early in the show, it's like this dude goes on a radio interview and says this, and all of a sudden somebody takes that, because here's the thing, look, these are for-profit businesses, and this is going to be really important in the Arch Manning era. Manning is going to be a very famous recruit. Any time that Arch Manning's name is going to be used, it's going to get some clicks. It's just going to. And so there is going to be a huge incentive for Arch Manning stories. There just is. And some of the foundations upon which some of these news reports are going to sit on is not going to exactly be the most firm. So, radio host, because it'd be one thing, if it was even a recruiting guy. This is a radio host. One radio host interviewing another. And the guy's I think he's going to either go to Alabama or Texas. Once again, the guy who initially said this, it wasn't his intent to, have this go all over the world. It's just one of those things that, there's kind of a domino series here in which, once one website writes about it, then pretty much all the other websites copy what the other website wrote. This is kind of how that works. And so all of a sudden now you got the Arch Manning thing all over the place of, so-and-so says he's down to Texas and Alabama. But here's the thing. The average person only cares about the two schools. They don't really care who said it. They just care about the two schools. But people who watch this show are a little savvier than that, and so they start digging a little deeper to find out, well, who actually thinks this? Who actually says this? And that's what I spend most of my day doing. It's digging through rumors and trying to get to patient zero, the origin of the rumor. And oftentimes when you get there, you're is this it? Is this all there was? There is going to be a lot of that with Arch Manning. So that's the whole point of the Hill Street Blues thing off the beginning of the show. Be careful out there. Just keep your head on the swivel.
Be careful out there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so, do I know the name of any of these actors? I remember all their faces on the show, but I don't know any of their names. I thought there was also a really famous guy there as well that was on the show. This was a Stephen Bochco production, I believe, and, Bochco went on to have, for those of you who like to watch all, the prestige dramas now, Hill Street Blues is basically the precursor to all of that. Basically the precursor to all of that. So for you young folks out there, if you like to watch whatever it is you like to watch, Hill Street Blues was the start of it. Philip Jordan Wells, very funny as always. All right, let me get a couple of YouTube comments. We'll get ready to roll out of here. Hope all of you are doing well. All right, on YouTube. There we go. Jay Shipe said I've been sending sliced bread death threats. See, that's the other thing. It's like the whole the entirety of the $30 million of supposed Texas A&M NIL money comes from, as Jimbo Fisher said, sliced bread. Like, that's the craziest thing in the world to me. Craziest thing in the world. Tyson Keever says, do you think that Stafford is a Ring of Honor candidate? Lots of community outreach and an exemplary dog on and off the field. Also, according to Mike, a big-time donor to UGA. Yeah, he's in the Silver Circle, as one of our other folks said, which is obviously, I think, the highest level of donation. So here's the thing. I kind of miss the days when people were only honored for their football accomplishments, which is not to say that things in life don't matter beyond that. But I think the circle of honor that has now, highest honor that a former UGA athlete can receive, I think that's great and all. But for you and me to have a conversation of, well, who's a circle of honor person? I don't really know. I don't really know. The criteria is kind of non-specific. My guess is, before it's all said and done, it's got something to do with donations. But beyond that, the criteria is pretty non-specific. I just sort of wish that college football could be like any other sport, which is just honor people who are good on the field, and give them statues and do those kinds of things. It's like when you make it more non-specific, like circle of honor, it makes it harder for us to have a sports-related conversation about stuff like that. So yeah, I hope that he would be. My guess is, he's maybe one more big check away from being in there. But I don't know. I kind of miss the days of, I get why you don't want to retire 1,000 jerseys, because eventually you just start running out of numbers. I do get that. But I also like the way in which, say, professional sports, you don't really have complicated criteria for who gets what. It's like, if you're a good player, you get the statue. If you're a good player, you get the jersey retired. It's like there's sort of a basic benchmark to achieve, and you kind of know the accomplishments that come after that. And college sports, especially at UGA, boy, it's like we're getting a lot more into a social media algorithm for who gets what, and I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of that. Paul Moon says, I love Stafford, but if we put him on the Ring of Honor, we're not going to have space for all the other people we'd need to add. Murray should be on there first. I don't know. Are you that? Murray obviously has better numbers, but do you feel that strongly that Aaron Murray is way better of a player than Matthew Stafford was? I don't know that I feel that way. Did I have more fun watching Georgia in 2012 or more fun watching Georgia in 2007? That may not be the right, judge for that. But, let's say that it's, kind of a football-only consideration. Would I give special attention to Stafford? I don't have a huge problem with that. Number one overall pick. That's kind of Charlie Trippy's claim to fame there as well. He was the number one overall pick. And so in Stafford's case, I don't have a huge problem with that. Paul Moon says, a player at UGA, he said he absolutely would put Aaron Murray in over Matthew Stafford. There's no doubt it's better stats. There's no doubt better stats. And maybe that's it. Slim Pickens says, how about this for the Ring of Honor? Chubb, Murray, Gurley, Roquan, Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis. Yeah, those are the kinds of guys that ought to be getting, really strong. There ought to be some sort of strong way to remember them at Georgia. Now, if you retire 27 and 11, if you start retiring all these numbers, eventually you got no numbers left. I do get that. But there's got to be some way to remember these guys. Foster Moss says, well, ESPN televised G-Day, being that we are the champs. Last year, the only team that got television treatment on for the spring game was Alabama. Everybody else was digital video. But last year was also weird, too, because of the weird NBA schedule and things like that. So it will be interesting to see, do spring games, because kind of quietly ESPN's was in a little bit of a cost-saving mode there for a while. Don't think we didn't notice that. Using maybe the pandemic as cover for some cost savings type things. So will we see a more filled out TV schedule for spring games? And will Georgia as the national champs benefit from that? That is a very good question. Very good question. Brian McPhail says, just put a plaque in Sanford Stadium without retiring the number. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I think North Carolina basketball may do that, where they may put a number in the rafters, because if you go up there, they got a million numbers in the rafters, but I don't believe they're all actually retired. They're just hanging from the rafters. That's kind of a cool idea. I think I'm right about that. Scott Boland says you can honor the player and still let other guys wear the number. I think that's right. Plus, because you also create this situation where after a while, you got kind of a cool collection of guys who've worn a number. You know, for instance, now that Brock Bowers is 19, like 19 at Georgia, it's Bowers, it's Charles Grant, it's Hines Ward. Like, that's a pretty prolific number. You know, 47 is David Pollock and Robert Edwards. It's like, you know, over the course of time, it's like you can start kind of collecting accolades for a number. You know, I know some programs have a special number that they like to give out, and good players earn the chance to wear that number. Georgia has never really done that. But if you're not going to retire the numbers, which I understand why you kind of wouldn't, especially in this recruiting age, it just becomes a little bit of a challenge for players that want a certain number. But as you kind of keep the numbers in circulation, all of a sudden it becomes kind of a cool legacy of all the great guys who've also worn that same number. Also, I should mention former kicker Todd Peterson, wearer of 47, now being worn by Dan Jackson. Paul Moon says Charles Grant was great. Yeah, he really was. Really was. Scott Boland says, I like the idea of guys having to live up to the number. Yeah, that's kind of fun. So Georgia has 4 retired jerseys. The 2 Heisman winners, Sinkwich and Herschel, Charlie Trippi, and then Theron Sapp, who was really, he had his jersey retired because he was known as the drought breaker. At one point in time, Georgia had a long drought, 8 consecutive losses to Georgia Tech, and Theron Sapp played well in that game, allowed Georgia to win that, and got his jersey retired for that. James K says Lawrence Fishburne was on Hill Street Blues. That's really cool. I like Lawrence Fishburne. Really cool. All right, last trip to the comment section. We got to go. Let's see what else is going on over here. Anything else on Facebook? Santi D. Arnold checks in to say if Stafford and No-Shown with the 2012 team, man, oh man, they would have what they would have done. Yeah, listen, I had a great time on that 2017. Really, really fun to me. Really fun to me. Rick Martin says Stafford came to UGA to become a pro. Murray came to UGA because he wanted to be a Bulldog. I don't know. I mean, do you really think that that Stafford enjoyed his time at Georgia less? Some of the pictures I've seen certainly makes it seem like that might not be true. Some of the pictures I've seen makes it seem like he was enjoying himself pretty well. But who knows? Kent Holcomb says being drafted number 1 overall stinks other than the big money. Being on the worst team is horrible, especially with no offensive line. If you're the quarterback, just glad Stafford survived the Detroit debacle with good knees. Ask Steve Barkowski and many others, and there is something to be said for that it does put you in a pretty bad situation, and you got to be, hopeful to get out of it, for sure. Let's see what else. Scorecheck says, I admired Jordan Davis not only for his play on the field, but also embracing the total college experience. He really immersed himself. Yeah, it seems like he got the most out of it. Like, to me, for those of us who will never know what it feels like to be kind of the focal point for a Georgia championship, like, we'll never feel that feeling. And so, like, the only thing that you kind of want to see from the guys that are there, look like you're having fun, because 8 gazillion people want to be where you are. And I realize that the actual challenges of doing the work are always more difficult than the image we have in our mind. I get that's more challenging. But do, as you're doing that job, kind of act like you have an appreciation for it. Act like you have an understanding of how lucky you are to be in that role. And Davis has kind of always kind of come across like that guy, which I think is really cool. He seemed to be having a really fun time. Really fun time. We'll finish with this. Chris says, UGA national champs. Never gets old. Bad day, just watch that pick six all over again. Always makes me feel better. Chris, I think a lot of folks in this comment section right now certainly understand the way that you feel about that, and I would include myself amongst that conversation. Dog national champion, as we like to say around here. A really fun thing indeed. All right, it's our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. I'm going to say goodbye to you for today. Make sure you check out R.S. Andrews online for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Showing up on time, doing the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what you can trust R.S. Andrews to do. Also, make sure you find them online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. And then check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ajc.com. Really good stuff. Hawks leading into the All-Star break. You can read about the latest with them, and boy, kind of what a mess that team sort of turned out to be here a little bit. Also, a little bit of an update on the Braves, kind of in that lockout situation, kind of what they look like once they're able to get going again. Obviously, pitchers and catchers should have already started, but that has not happened. So what's next for the Braves? AJC.com on that. And then I hate to say this, but just another sad story. Speaking, we talked a lot today about dogs of the 90s. You know, Cannon Parkman, former UGA kicker, has passed away, and Chip's got a story up there on that at AJC.com. Just so sad. So sad. He's only a couple of years older than I am. Just really, really awful. Just really awful. So prayers, more prayers to another family in our UGA sphere here. Very, very sad. So you can read about that, ajc.com there as well. A continuation, unfortunately, of some bad news around Georgia these last few days. But on this show, we'll do what we can to try to keep a smile on your face when possible, although real life does creep in from time to time. And so that's certainly an example of that. Thanks for being here today on DawgNation Daily. Back at 9:45 for our 1st and 15 tomorrow, 10 a.m. on all the other platforms after that. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.